Hello besties and welcome to another Genshin theory! Last week I started reworking my old Conriya theory from almost a year ago. Like the original series, we started the new one by talking about the Archons. I recommend watching that video before this one, and a link to it is in the description. But today we're going to be talking about Khaenri'ah itself and if they were truly innocent like they portray themselves to be. When we speak to Dainsleif, he acts like Khaenri'ah did nothing wrong and didn't deserve to be eradicated. I do agree that Khaenri'ahns didn't have to die, but some of them were seriously dangerous and had to be stopped. The biggest example of that is Reindetyr, also known as Gold. She was an incredibly intelligent alchemist who used a special form of alchemy called Chemia to create artificial life. So far we know that she's responsible for Albedo, his various clones, Durin, and the Rift Wolves. Of the lives she's created, most of them pose a huge threat to Teyvat. Durin was sent to attack Mondstadt during the Cataclysm, but Dvalin was able to fight back and protect the country. Durin died and became part of Dragonspine's landscape, giving the mountain its new name. In Shadows Amidst Snowstorms, we saw two Albedo clones, the first Albedo and the Fellflower. The Fellflower wasn't actually created by Reindetyr, but the first Albedo. That being said, the first Albedo wouldn't know how to do that without Reindatyr's tutelage and Albedo's notes, which he got from her, so I think the Fellflower is an indirect product from her. The first Albedo sent the Fellflower to kill our Albedo so he could replace him. The Rift Wolves live throughout Teyvat. You run into them in Wolvendom, the Chasm, and Surumi Island. They're one of the more dangerous enemies in that they give you the corrosion effect, which quickly drains your health and often leads to death if you're not careful or quick enough to heal yourself. During the Cataclysm, the Rift Wolves were sent to Inazuma to attack the country, leaving A to fight them off while her sister went to Conriya. From my perspective, it looks like Durin, the Rift Wolves, and the Fellflower don't have free will, but the two Albedos absolutely do. This was Reindatyr's ultimate goal. She wanted to create autonomous artificial human beings. I think she was successful with both Albedos, but for some reason she decided that the first one wasn't good enough, so she fed him to Durin. But somehow, he managed to escape Durin's stomach and emerge in Dragonspine where he stalked and harassed our Albedo. The first Albedo obviously has emotions because why else would he do that? He feels rejected and he wants to feel like he belongs. Our Albedo has free will in that he has his own goals and feelings. He has a brotherly relationship with Klee, he goes out of his way to defend Barbara from her stalker, and he just generally cares about saving Mondstadt from himself. Albedo is fully aware of how dangerous he can become, but he wants to protect his new country from what he may end up doing. Reindatyr was Khaenri'ah, which means Albedo is technically Khaenri'ah too. Most Khaenri'ahns are very proud of their heritage. Dainsleif has no issue talking about his fallen country. Kaya seems to be a member of the Abyss Order whose main goal is to avenge Conriya, and Halfdan happily defended Conriya during the Cataclysm even when it would lead to his death. Our Albedo doesn't care about any of that though. He has his own identity outside of Conriyan ideals, which in turn means Reindatyr's as well. The problem with that is that Reindatyr was too successful in creating two autonomous artificial lives. This is actually a problem we see in real life too. Lately, ethical concerns with artificial intelligence have become a big deal. In my opinion, if we're gonna create artificial intelligence that has the ability to think and feel for itself, we have to be 100% willing to accept it as a human being, even if it technically isn't. I don't think we as a society are there yet, so it's probably best to keep artificial intelligence limited for now. I think this is the same ethical dilemma that we see with Albedo. Reindatyr succeeded in her goal with the first Albedo, but she got rid of him. Why? She accomplished what she wanted. He has his own thoughts and feelings. I think she may have changed her mind a few times throughout the process of the Primordial Human project. Maybe when she saw what she had done, she realized that she'd never be able to accept the first Albedo as a human being, so she discarded him. After that, she may have thought that she threw away a huge alchemic discovery, so she recreated him, resulting in our Albedo, who again has his own thoughts and feelings. This is dangerous because if she hadn't disappeared, who knows what could have happened to our Albedo? She might have changed her mind again. Celestia's arrogance would absolutely prevent them from viewing the Albedos as real people. They likely see the artificial lives created by Reindatyr as affronts to nature and the heavenly principles, and to a certain extent I get that. These are lives that will be constantly threatened by the fleeting opinions of humanity. It may be better to just stop the production of them before it gets out of hand because Reindatyr really didn't go about this responsibly. But Reindatyr is not the only creator of artificial life in Khaenri'ah. We don't know exactly who created the ruin machines, but they probably don't come from alchemy. Not like that really matters though. Dainsleif tells us that the ruin machines were given code names to disguise their true purpose as instruments of war. That seems pretty shady even for Conriya. Ruin machines are all over Teyvat. We're told that they wandered off once Conriya had fallen, but I don't know if I believe that. After all, Dainsleif is very clearly an unreliable narrator, so I don't take everything he says at face value unless there's outside evidence to back him up. To me, there's strong evidence that says ruin machines were everywhere in Teyvat long before the Cataclysm. So far, every country has suspicious locations with ruin guards: the Nameless Island in Mondstadt, the factory in Khaenri'ah from Child's Story Quest, and the underground ruins on Khaenri'ah Island. On the Nameless Island, you can clearly see that there's a tunnel beneath it. A perfectly straight horizontal line can be drawn from it to Decorabian's Tower, which is an extremely important location for ruin machines. I really believe that there are underground tunnels built by Conrians beneath Teyvat, and that's probably one of them, but I already made a whole video about that. Point is, Conriya likely has something to do with this island. There's a couple decommissioned ruin guards just sitting on the beach. They don't activate to fight you when you approach them, so they've probably been there for a really long time. The factory in Khaenri'ah is complicated. Some people believe it was built by the Fatui, but I believe that the Fatui just took it over recently and that it was actually built by Conrians. The factory looks old and it's filled with puzzles, which implies that it's not new and that technologically advanced people made it. Ildatore, one of the Fatui harbingers, wants to learn more about how ruin machines operate, so he sent the Fatui to start running the factory. But that doesn't necessarily mean he built it. He could have just found it and restarted its operations. That would make a lot more sense than him building a brand new factory that's super far away from his home country. He could just have Fatui that are already in Khaenri'ah use it while he's off in Snezhnaya. That would mean that Conrians built this factory a long time ago. Beneath Khaenri'ah Island is what I can only describe as a ruin guard storage facility. There's a shocking amount of dead ruin guards throughout it. We've never seen so many of them together like that. The ruins are pretty well hidden too, and since Khaenri'ah Island is largely unoccupied by Inazumans, this would be the perfect place for Conrians to set up a storage warehouse outside of their own country. But now we have to answer why. Why would Conrians place their war machines all over Teyvat if not for malicious purposes? There's no way of excusing that as something innocent. To me, it looks like Conrians were preparing for a full-scale attack of Teyvat. To a certain extent, we already know that they wanted that. They sent Durin and Riftwolves to attack Teyvat, so I don't think it's impossible to say that they stationed those ruin machines around Teyvat in preparation for the war. Maybe the reason the ruin machines are so widely distributed in locations that aren't near any clear Conrian activity is because they were activated during the war that they initiated and as such had to spread out to fully attack Teyvat. With the recent release of the Chasm, Conriya looks even more guilty. We learned that during the Cataclysm, Riftwolves were sent to the Chasm. They were sent to attack Inazuma as well, but at least A was there to fight them off because at the time the country technically had 2 Archons. But Liyue obviously didn't, so a nameless Yaksha had to defend the Chasm with the Millilith while Rex Lapis was in Conriya. Many of the defenders from Liyue died, including that Yaksha. If Conriya was attacked by Celestia and the Archons by surprising their home country, why would they do all that? It really seems like they wanted to cause chaos throughout the whole continent before the Cataclysm even happened. Almost a year ago, I made my first ever Genshin theory about why Dainsleif is likely working with the Abyss Order. I think all of my points from back then still hold up today, so I really recommend checking out that video, but I'll summarize it here. The game constantly hints at Dainsleif being untrustworthy through dialogue options in Dainsleif's narration. We have plenty of dialogue choices where we can just straight up tell Dainsleif that we don't trust him, and when we ask him questions, he usually just ignores them. Dainsleif is from Conriya, and he's very proud of that, so you'd think he would want to work with the Abyss Order to avenge his fallen homeland, but for some reason he opposes them. I think that all the times we see him fight the Abyss Order are staged in order to make him look more trustworthy to us. That would explain why he only ever shows up when the Abyss Order is around. He took the first Field Tiller's Eye, an extremely important item to the Abyss Order's plans, from us and then chased after them. When we confronted him about it, he said that it was in, quote, a safe place and didn't elaborate. I personally believe that he handed it over to the Abyss Order because why else would he be so vague? Not to mention he uses abyssal power, which we really only ever see members of the Abyss Order use. Because of all of that, I think it's safe to say that Dainsleif is a secret member of the Abyss Order, or at least an ally to them. During the new Archon quest in the Chasm, he just proves that even more. While exploring the inverted ruins that supposedly resemble Conrian architecture, Dainsleif comes across one of his soldiers from 500 years ago, Halfdan. Halfdan has since become a Black Serpent Knight due to the curse laid upon Conrians at the hands of Celestia, and he was in the Abyss Order before his death at the end of the quest. If Dainsleif truly opposed the Abyss Order like he says he does, he wouldn't be so kind to Halfdan when they interact. But he says that Halfdan has faithfully done his duty for 500 years. Is faithfully doing his duty being a member of the organization that he supposedly hates? It just doesn't add up. You could argue that Dainsleif was just being nice because his friend was dying and he didn't want his last moments to be bad, but even then there was no need to praise him for doing something that he's supposed to be against. Dainsleif is always making himself look more guilty and less trustworthy, which then makes Conriya as a whole look like that too. Something I've never touched on is Dainsleif's title. His in-game title is Twilight Sword, but in promotional material it's Bowkeeper. A bough is the main branch of a tree that supports the others. In my series on the Byakuyakuku collection, we went over the parable of the tree, which is one of the sections in Volume 3. It tells the story of a gardener who's forced to kill a tree spirit that they're in love with because the king willed it. The gardener seeks advice from a priest who tells them to replant one of the branches to revive the tree spirit, and it works immediately even though it should have taken 500 years. Anytime you see the phrase 500 years, you should immediately think Conriya. Even though I don't think this story is from Conriya, it's definitely thematically tied to it. So far, all of the Archons we've met have deceased loved ones who turned into trees. Venti has Vanessa, Zhongli has Ajdaha, and A has her sister Makoto. From A's story quest, we know that the ley lines are able to keep a person's spirit alive in a tree, which is actually what I originally thought that the parable of the tree was talking about before we learned that it was true. When I originally talked about the parable of the tree, I said that it seems like Khaenri'ahs must have interfered with the ley lines and caused the many ley line disorders that Teyvat now suffers from today. If trees are so clearly tied to the ley lines and Dainsleif's title is basically tree protector, you'd think that it would mean he's not on the Abyss Order's side. But every significant character that represents a nation has had someone close die and become a tree. Dainsleif clearly represents Conriya from a narrative standpoint. He could have a deceased friend or family member who became a tree, and now he wants to protect that tree. We don't know enough about that title specifically yet to decide if it's evidence against or for Dainsleif being in the Abyss Order. So, do I think Conriya deserved to be destroyed? Of course not. Innocent people died, and that's totally unacceptable. But Khaenri'ahs were doing things that needed to be stopped. They were acting unethically and irresponsibly, which put all of Teyvat in danger. I get why Celestia sent the Archons there to destroy the country, but again, I don't think everyone had to die to solve the problem. The Cataclysm is such a headache to work with because there's no good side to be on. Celestia and Conriya are both equally guilty here. Conriya may have started it, but Celestia only escalated it to where we are today, with thousands, if not millions, of people dead or traumatized from the events that took place 500 years ago. Next week, we'll wrap up this series by talking about predictions for Conriya as a playable location in-game and where its story will go from here. In other news, I have a bunch of Genshin-themed music on all streaming services. Just look up Lexi Cameron wherever you listen to music and you'll find it. I have an album of themes for all the countries called Teyvat Travel Guide and an EP with character themes for Vanessa, Dottore, Dainsleif, and Shikanoe and Heizo called The Lost Moments. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye, besties!